Welcome everyone to the Stateless Atheist. Today I'm going to be summarizing Reclaiming the Anti-Fascist Roots of Libertarianism by Logan Marie Glitterbomb in the book Anti-Fascism, published by the Center for a Stateless Society. It would be great if you could buy a book and support C4SS, as they are a great organization, but if not, I will link a copy of the article below. Like usual, I'm going to summarize the video, then after, give my thoughts on the piece. I do it this way so not to confuse my thoughts with the authors. If you stay to the end, I will provide sources where you can continue research on this topic. Well, let's begin. Glitterbomb starts off explaining how the libertarian movement has flirted with paleoconservatism. The alt-right, white nationalists, and other far-right wing groups have been trying to co-opt the libertarian movement for some time now. She states profoundly that we need to return to our anti-fascist roots. American libertarianism today is based on two traditions, the socialist anarchists and the classical liberal traditions. The socialist anarchists were explicitly anti-fascist, even the early American ones. The first American libertarians who were socialist anarchists existed when the United States government was pretty friendly with fascist Italy and, to a lesser extent, but still to a degree, Nazi Germany. Some early American libertarians even went to Spain to fight fascism in what they called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. The classical liberal tradition is also rooted in anti-fascist ideas as exemplified by Ludwig von Mises in the following passage in Liberalism.
The great danger threatening domestic policy from the side of fascism lies in its complete faith in the decisive power of violence.
And he continues.
So much for the domestic policy of fascism, that its foreign policy, based as it is on the avowed principle of force in international relations, cannot fail to give rise to an endless series of wars that must destroy all of modern civilization, requires no discussion. To maintain and further raise our present level of economic development, peace among nations must be assured. But they cannot live together in peace if the basic tenet of the ideology by which they are governed is the belief that one's own nation can secure its place in the community of nations by force alone.
Unfortunately, today we have people like Augustus, Saul, Invictus, and other alt-righters running for office under the Libertarian Party, and Milo Yiannopoulos expressing anarcho-capitalist sentiments, while the Hopper caucus invited Richard Spencer to the International Students for Liberty Convention in 2017. We need to clearly stand up against this intrusion. Glitterbomb commends groups and individuals for their fight against fascism, from Students of Liberty's denial of Richard Spencer at their event to Will Colley for making sure that Invictus did not have a platform unopposed, and Derek Brose for creating videos explaining why fascism and libertarianism cannot be in alliance. Recently, these efforts have joined together to make the Libertarian Anti-Fascism Committee. It was created to help remove fascist elements from the party and to guide the liberty movement away from fascism. Libertarianism and fascism cannot coexist. The former is based on non-aggression, while the latter feeds on aggression. Preparing for this video, I contacted Ms. Glitterbomb. In our discussion, I asked her about the Hopper Caucus, because I never heard of it. However, I have heard of the Mises Caucus and thought that was what she was referring to. She said no, she was referring to the Hopper Caucus. So I looked it up and found a good blog post by Zachary Woodman describing the Hopper Caucus as a self-named internet group. They are not a caucus of the Libertarian Party, but they are responsible for inviting Richard Spencer to the International Students for Liberty Conference in 2017. They have close ties to Liberty Hangout and the Liberty Conservative. I don't want to spend a lot more time on this, but I will link to Zach's blog post about the Hopper Caucus and my video on Richard Spencer if you want to know more about the situation. Glitterbomb also told me she wished she spent more time on the controversy regarding Mises and fascism. It is something, before messaging her, I also thought I should comment on. In many circles that reject Mises and the Austrian school, they associate him with fascism. They do so on two grounds. They argue that he, one, worked for a fascist government, and 2, that he defended fascism in his book Liberalism. The first one is quite simply refuted, as Mises worked for the Austrian government under Otto von Habsburg, who was anti-fascist himself, having this to say about fascism.
I absolutely reject Nazi fascism for Austria. This un-Austrian movement promises everything to everyone, but really intends the most ruthless subjugation of the Austrian people. The people of Austria will never tolerate that our beautiful fatherland should become an exploited colony, and that the Austrian should become a man of second category.
The second claim is a little harder to refute, but I still think it's doable. They quote this from Mises' book Liberalism.
It cannot be denied that fascism and similar movements aiming at the establishment of dictatorships are full of the best intentions, and that their intervention has, for the moment, saved European civilization.
And taken that as it is, it sounds quite damning. But is it? I need to make 3 points here regarding to this claim. First, that quote is taken out of a much larger quote where Mises condemns fascism as a whole. Listen here as Mises talks about the problems with fascism.
Fascism can triumph today because universal indignation at the infamies committed by the socialists and communists has obtained for it the sympathies of wide circles. But when the fresh impression of the crimes of the Bolsheviks has paled, the socialist program will once again exercise its power of attraction on the masses. For fascism does nothing to combat it except to suppress socialist ideas and to persecute the people who spread them. If it wanted to really combat socialism, it would have to oppose it with ideas. There is, however, only one idea that can be effectively opposed to socialism, viz., that of liberalism. It has often been said that nothing furthers a cause more than creating martyrs for it. This is only approximately correct. What strengthens the cause of the persecuted faction is not the martyrdom of its adherents, but the fact that they are being attacked by force and not by intellectual weapons. Repression by brute force is always a confession of the inability to make use of the better weapons of the intellect. Better because they alone give promise of final success. This is the fundamental error from which fascism suffers and which will ultimately cause its downfall. The victory of fascism in a number of countries is only an episode in the long series of struggles over the problem of property. The next episode will be the victory of communism. The ultimate outcome of the struggle, however, will not be decided by arms, but by ideas. It is ideas that group men into fighting factions, that press the weapons into their hands, and that determine against whom and for whom the weapon shall be used. It is they alone, and not the arms, that in the last analysis turn the scales. So much for the domestic policy of fascism, that its foreign policy, based as it is on the avowed principle of force in international relations, cannot fail to give rise to an endless series of wars that must destroy all of modern civilization, requires no discussion. To maintain and further raise our present level of economic development, peace among nations must be assured. But they cannot live together in peace if the basic tenet of the ideology by which they are governed is the belief that one's own nation can secure its place in the community of nations by force alone. It cannot be denied that fascism and similar movements aiming at the establishment of dictatorships are full of the best intentions, and that their intervention has, for the moment, saved European civilization. The merit that fascism has thereby won itself will live on eternally in history. But though its policy has brought salvation for the moment, it is not of the kind of which could promise continued success. Fascism was an emergency makeshift. To view it as something more would be a fatal error.
As you can see in that quote, Mises did not see fascism as anything great. Yes, he did think it was the lesser of two evils, as he believed it was provoked by the communist and Bolshevik aggression. As he says here,
the deeds of the fascists and of other parties corresponding to them were emotional reflex actions evoked by indignation at the deeds of the Bolsheviks and communists. As soon as the first flush of anger had passed, their policy took a more moderate course, and will probably become even more so with the passage of time.
And that brings me to my second point. He was not alone in thinking that the fascists were the lesser of two evils. It was actually quite common at the time. Here's a quote from the New York Times describing the same belief.
In a period when all politicians are either dull or unwilling to break away from routine, tradition, when it seems that in every Western nation the spring of imagination is dried up, Mussolini gives the impression of an ever-welling source. One may object to any form of dictatorship, but one cannot help being stimulated by the phenomenal vitality of this man who, in his role of dictator, has commanded the barren soil of Italy to produce wheat within a given time, ordered his territory to be expanded by reclaiming swamps, without extending his frontiers, and not content with summoning new cities into existence, is changing the face of the eternal city by digging up the buried glories of imperial Rome. In order to create a new Italy, he is returning to the old sources of Roman strength and domination. He wishes to resuscitate the material vestiges of ancient Rome because they are beautiful and invaluable, but also and mainly because in doing so he hopes to revive the old virtues of the rugged men who under iron discipline once fashioned Roman power. Here I had the feeling that there is no limiting condition imposed on any fascist project, a strange impression that whatever Mussolini commands is executed without being hampered by problems practical or financial.
And the New York Times were not alone with this feeling. It was calming in the media and academia at the time. This brings me to my final point. We are looking at the situation in hindsight, something Mises did not have at the time of his writing. When he wrote this passage, Mussolini was in power for only 5 years, but fascism only threw off its mask 2 years prior, and both Hitler and the fascists in Japan will not take power for another 3 to 7 years. As Hitler took power, Mises fled Austria from the German fascists. Now, this was not an exhaustive examination of Mises and the Austrians' view on fascism, but that is because this video is more about Glitterbomb's article. I just wanted to address the elephant in the room, but I don't want to take up too much time in this video. If there is support, I may do a whole video on Austrians and fascism. Like usual, I'm going to link all of my sources below. Thank you, and hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you soon.